Your phone buzzes. You open the group chat. You send a message. And then nothing. No reply. No little typing bubble. Just silence, sitting there, getting heavier by the minute. You check it again 10 minutes later. Still nothing. Your chest tightens a little. Your mind starts running through every possible reason why. Did you say something wrong? Are they annoyed with you? Are they talking about you somewhere else, in some other chat you're not part of? You tell yourself, it's nothing. It's probably nothing. But your body doesn't believe you. Most people assume our deepest, oldest fears are about survival in the most literal sense. Predators, starvation, falling from a great height, death itself in its rawest form. That's the story we've been told, the one that shows up in nature documentaries and evolutionary psychology books written for a general audience. Early humans feared the saber-tooth in the grass, the drought that dried up the river, the long winter with no food stored. Fear, in this telling, is about the body ending. But the real answer is far stranger. For most of human history, the thing your ancestors feared more than death itself wasn't death at all. It was being cut off from the group. Here's what nobody tells you. A lone early human, separated from their band, wasn't just sad or lonely. They were, in almost every practical sense, already dead. It just hadn't caught up with them yet. To understand why, you have to understand what a human being actually was, biologically, 200,000 years ago. Not an individual predator built for solo survival, like a tiger or a bear. A fragile, slow, weaponless primate with soft skin, blunt nails and no fur to speak of, who could only survive because it was never alone. Everything about early human survival was cooperative. Hunting large game required coordinated groups, not lone hunters. Watching for danger required rotating shifts of alert eyes, not one exhausted person trying to stay awake forever. Raising children required what anthropologist Sarah Blaffer-Hrdy has spent decades documenting as cooperative breeding, i.e. a system where mothers were never expected to raise offspring alone, but relied on a wide network of alloparents, other adults and older children who helped feed, carry, and protect the young. Take a human out of that network, and you didn't just remove their support system. You removed their entire survival strategy. This is where the numbers matter. The anthropologist Robin Dunbar spent years studying primate brain size relative to group size and found something striking. The size of a primate's neocortex R, the part of the brain responsible for complex thought I, correlates directly with the size of the social group that species can maintain. For humans, that number lands somewhere around 150 stable relationships, a figure that's come to be known simply as Dunbar's number. Your brain, in other words, wasn't primarily built to solve calculus or invent tools. It was built to track a web of roughly 150 social relationships, who you could trust, who owed you a favor, who might betray you, who your children could rely on if something happened to you. That is an enormous amount of neurological real estate dedicated to one single problem, staying inside the group. So when banishment happened, and in small hunter-gatherer bands, exile as punishment for serious offenses was documented across cultures. It wasn't a symbolic punishment. It was, functionally, a death sentence with a delay. No coalition to hunt with, no one to share food during a bad season, no one to warn you when danger was near. Your odds of surviving more than a few weeks alone, especially in unfamiliar territory, dropped close to zero. The body might live a little longer, but the outcome was already decided. Now, here's the part that should genuinely change how you think about yourself. If exclusion from the group was, in evolutionary terms, functionally equivalent to death, then the emotional systems that evolved to warn you about it should be just as intense, just as urgent, just as impossible to ignore as the systems that warn you about physical danger. And that's exactly what researchers have found. In the early 2000s, the social psychologist Kipling Williams developed a deceptively simple experiment called Cyberball, where a participant plays a virtual game of catch with two other players, A, who are actually computer-controlled A, and at some point, the other two simply stop throwing the ball to them. No insult, no confrontation, just quiet exclusion in a meaningless game with strangers the participant will never meet. And yet, brain imaging studies built around this paradigm including work led by neuroscientist Naomi Eisenberger, found that being excluded activates the anterior cingulate cortex, the same region of the brain that lights up during physical pain. Your brain, it turns out, doesn't have a completely separate filing system for getting hurt and getting left out. At a certain level, it treats them as versions of the same emergency. This is worth naming because it deserves a name. Call it the social death hypothesis, the idea that human beings evolved to register exclusion from the group not as an inconvenience or a hurt feeling, but as a literal threat to life signal, wired through the same ancient alarm systems that once warned us about physical harm. It's why a snide comment from a coworker can sit in your stomach for the rest of the day. It's why being left off an invite list can feel disproportionately devastating, even when you logically know it doesn't matter. Your nervous system isn't being dramatic. It's running code that's tens of thousands of years old, code that never got the memo that exile no longer means starvation. And here's the twist that makes this even stranger. Surveys on common fears, repeated for decades across different populations, consistently find that public speaking ranks above death as people's most reported fear. Not falling, not disease, not dying. Standing in front of a room and being judged. On paper, that makes no sense. Public speaking has never killed anyone. But if you run it through the lens of the social death hypothesis, it makes perfect sense. Standing in front of a group and potentially being rejected, mocked, or found wanting triggers the exact same ancient alarm that used to mean expulsion from the tribe. Your brain isn't afraid of the microphone. It's afraid of being cast out. This also reframes something else. Gossip. We tend to treat gossip as a shallow, unproductive habit, something people do out of boredom or pettiness. But evolutionary researchers, including Robin Dunbar himself, have argued that gossip likely served as a form of social grooming, a way of constantly checking the emotional temperature of the group, tracking who was trustworthy, who was slipping in status, who might be at risk of exclusion. In small ancestral bands, knowing where you stood socially wasn't idle curiosity. It was a survival update, delivered in real time, every single day. Before we go further, it's worth pausing to be fair here. None of this is an argument that ancient tribal life was some kind of emotional paradise we've lost, or that modern individualism is a mistake. Small, tightly bound groups also meant intense pressure to conform, limited privacy, and real danger in being different. Plenty of people who didn't fit the group's expectations suffered for it long before modern therapy or modern social safety nets existed. The fact that we now have the option to leave a toxic friend group, move cities, work remotely, or simply be alone on a Friday night without it threatening our survival is a genuine hard-won kind of freedom. Solitude used to be a death sentence. Today, for most people reading this, it's a choice, sometimes even a relief. That shift matters, and it's worth appreciating rather than romanticizing away. Still, the wiring hasn't caught up with the change in circumstances. Let's walk through how we got here. Around 200,000 years ago, early Homo sapiens were already living in small, interdependent bands, where survival outside the group was nearly impossible. By roughly 70,000 years ago, larger cooperative networks and early symbolic behavior were reinforcing group identity as a core survival tool. Around 12,000 years ago, as agriculture began settling humans into fixed communities, exile as a formal punishment appears across early legal and social codes, precisely because it was understood as one of the harshest penalties available, short of death itself. By the early 2000s, Kipling-Williams's Cyberball experiments were demonstrating in laboratory conditions that this ancient alarm system still fires instantly, even over something as trivial as a video game with strangers. And today, in the space of a single afternoon, that same alarm can be triggered by an unanswered text, a meeting you weren't invited to, or a message left unread. So the next time your phone buzzes and the reply doesn't come, and your chest tightens for reasons that feel bigger than the situation deserves, understand what's actually happening underneath it. You are not being oversensitive. You are not overreacting. You are running a threat detection system built for a world where being cut off from other people meant your life was already, quietly, over. The silence on your screen isn't dangerous anymore, but somewhere in the oldest part of your brain, it still reads exactly like it is.